Right, so welcome. This is our last online chair yoga class. Like I said before, I do intend to start a in-person chair yoga class at some point. I know a lot of people are not ready for that, and you may never be, which is fine. The announcement I'm going to be making on February 1st is that I'm going to be making all of my YouTube classes public and free. So you'll have over 200 classes to work with, and not all of those are chair classes, but you can find those chair classes in there, as well as everything else that we've recorded since almost 2 years ago when we started online classes. So that's my gift to you, is my intention that I hope everybody keeps practicing and keeps enjoying it and not getting it stale. And I know how hard a home practice can be when you're on your own. So hopefully that'll help out. And I'm always available by email if you ever need to run something by me or talk or anything. I'd be happy to stay in touch. I hope we do. So for today, we're going to do a restorative class. It's going to be using a bolster pretty heavily. So if hopefully you've figured something out with your pillow. And a couple blocks if you have them. If you don't, you can substitute something of equal height, or books or soup cans, or you might just not use them, which it'll be fine without them. Blanket if you have one for the very end of class when we do the breathing practices and sitting quietly and centering ourselves in Savasana, the final pose. So we'll get started. We're just it's such a cold day. I'm keeping my socks on. We are not actually coming up to standing, so you won't need to have the traction that we sometimes need. So if you want to put your socks on, feel free. I also have my jacket on. So we're going to start just getting centered and arriving and letting the dust settle. So just take a moment to arrange yourself on your chair. So you're not going to use the back of the chair. You might pull some flesh out from under your sitting bones. You'll put your feet right underneath your knees. Your hands are going to be somewhere on your lap, but closer to your torso so that your shoulders move back. And then your eyes are going to close. And you'll begin just by noticing the parts of your body that are touching the floor, touching the chair, and give these parts of your body permission to release and let go. So you feel like you're making a connection with the chair and a connection with the floor. And then recognizing those parts of your body that aren't necessarily touching down, but they're moving down, like the shoulders, the lower jaw, the skin of your face, let it gently move down. And starting to find the lightness, the surrendered abdomen. Bringing your attention to the navel area, so 2 inches above and below the navel. Just bring your attention there. Maybe imagine the color orange and yellow, maybe sensing heat and movement. So these two areas, if you study the chakras, the energy vortices in the body. Second chakra, 2 inches below the navel, is kind of associated with our creativity. And then 2 inches above is our seat of personal power. When these areas are tight, we feel somewhat powerless, and the opposite of creativity is kind of a fear state. So just breathing in, bringing some warmth, some attention. And then lastly, with the foundation of the body, with the ease that you've tapped into, start to invite a sense of buoyancy along your spine. So you might use the image of filling up a small balloon between each set of your vertebra. So if you just kind of study in your mind's eye, watch the spine move up from the lowest point up. Just put a little balloon between each set And every time you breathe in, just inflate it a little bit. And when you exhale, don't let it deflate. And that line of energy carries all the way up to the brainstem and continues on out through the crown of your head. Just take a moment to see if you can sense both your foundation, parts of yourself that are connected with the floor, releasing down, and also your lightness. We're going to start to come out of the centering pose. So just joining your hands together in front of your heart. And on an exhale, bowing toward your heart. Release your hands. Lift your head. Gently open your eyes. And welcome. So we're going to start in child's pose. And the blocks are there just to make it a little more compact. So if you have something to stand on, remember equal height is generally better than unequal height. You don't need the blocks, but it will just elevate the feet a little bit. So you're going to put those there if you're going to use them under the feet. And then we're going to use the bolster as a way to just take the pose with head and torso and arm support. So just put it on your lap. And sometimes the head going down is not, you have to kind of find your own way into that. So one thing we don't want to do is suffocate. So make sure the nose is free and clear. If the arms feel too far away, you can stack up your fists, one on top of the other, and rest the forehead. If you still feel like it's too low, you could take your elbows to your bolster, your hands to the prayer position, and your forehead against your thumbs. In general, we're just trying to elongate the stretch of the spine in one single curve. We're trying to get a nice opening to the back body. And we're making it a little more compact with the kind of the filler of the bolster and the feet stepped up to make the legs a little closer to the trunk. And with the pressure to the abdomen, just letting your breath float into the back body. So restorative yoga is not about stretching muscle, although that might occur as a byproduct. It's really about massaging organs and putting organs in different orientations with gravity, which is very helpful to our organs. So you have a little compression going on in the center body organs. Your head is down. You should feel some amount of surrender here, which is very softening to that giant organ of your skin, which when we're in a more effortful state, we might be more contracted. And just see if at the same time that you're breathing in, you can sense the elongation of the spine, but also the broadening of the back body. We're going to just gently alter the pose to do a sideways child's pose. So you can gently rise up slowly. If you're using blocks, you're just going to push them over to the right. Your feet will step onto them, kind of shift it off to the right. You're going to primarily be resting your bolster pillow on your right thigh. The idea here is that when we shift to the side, the alternate side is going to get this big opening. So your left side body gets this really nice elongation. Right kidney gets a compression, a massage, which is good for the organ. You can put your head down. I'm going to keep mine up so I can keep talking at you. But if you find that same position for your head so that you're not suffocating or squashing the nose, that you're not feeling too low and kind of overdoing it, that perfect kind of sweet spot to rest your head. And when you found it, then you're just going to bring your attention over the left side body. Maybe start to invite an opening between the left shoulder and the left hip. You can bring your awareness from the periphery of the body into the core, so starting at the outermost sheath of your skin, letting the skin expand, connective tissue right beneath, muscle, flesh. Feel the intercostals expanding between those left side ribs. Nice big yawning open around the left kidney. There's 3 more breaths here. So as you can imagine, we're going to be moving to the other side now. So just begin coming out of it. You can move over and up or up and over. It doesn't matter a whole lot. You might notice one feels better than the other in your body to come out of it. And just pushing those blocks, if you're using them, over to the left. Sliding your bolster pillow over to your left thigh. And then you can just put your arms down on that. You can again use elbows in prayer position if you need a little bit more height. Get your head somehow connected with something. So you go into that quieter parasympathetic nervous system state. Once you've set up the pose, then you're just allowing it to work on you. So stage 1 is working on the pose. Stage 2 is letting it work on you. So just becoming open to your breath. Watching the body start to settle into the position you've put it in too. Watching how the mind relates here. It's usually pretty quieting to be in forward bends, especially with this much support. The caution is that you don't go into a dull state, or that the mind doesn't start to wander. So if you do kind of sense that happening, there's a few options, because you want to keep yourself really present. That's always the idea. You can alter the pose somehow to make it a little bit more sensational. You can become a little bit more intensive with your breathing, meaning you're really focused on your breathing. You can work with awareness, keeping the light shining on that right side body and all the parts that are feeling affected by this shape you've put yourself in. You might notice with every exhale, the left kidney getting a little massage. And just 3 more breaths. And on an inhale, you can just start to, again, you might come up first and then out of the sideways movement, or you might do both at once, or you might come out of the sideways movement first and then up. Really is all about how it feels in your body. So we're going to transition to a very gentle back bend. You will have to kind of move forward on your chair, not to the point that you do a somersault, but right on the edge of your chair, because we're putting this soft prop vertically behind us. So it's between you and the back of the chair. Your feet can come down. They don't need to be elevated anymore. You can have just a stabilizing stance with your legs, so whatever that is for you. And we're going to be gently leaning back, and just if it doesn't hurt the shoulders, you can interlock your hands and use your hands as a little hammock for your head. But feel free to just let the full weight of the head press into the hands. You don't have to really apply effort here, but you can if you want, and if you feel like you might need that for your attention to stay. But you're just getting a really nice opening to the chest, of course, to the whole space of the diaphragm. And even though you're trying to keep yourself on that chair without losing any of that purchase of your chair seat, see if you can identify your sitting bones and just kind of scrub them forward on the chair, not to the point that they actually move. But this will help you keep your pelvis tilted in a way that's very supportive when you're back bending. So the posterior tilt of the pelvis. And don't feel like you have to keep your eyes open. It's more restful if you soften your gaze, look down, or even close the eyes. And once you've set it up and you're holding those wise actions, you're going to just bring your attention, bring your breath, bring your presence. Notice if there's any unnecessary hardening in the pose. You might have some tension happening in your face, which is common in back bends. Think about your temples descending, jaws relaxed, throat is soft. And for the next several breaths, just imagine the journey the breath takes. We have the pelvic floor as the lowest point of the diaphragm. And it actually comes as high as the soft palate at the roof of the mouth. So just imagine that journey in one breath. Keep that glowing, warm, moving abdomen going. Try not to grip in the abdomen. Even with your eyes closed, it's important to watch those kind of energized eyes that happen in back bends. So even if eyes are closed, pointing your eyes down toward your cheeks. Just a couple more gentle breaths. Nothing forceful. As you're ready, you can start to move out of it. You might start by bringing your torso forward. You might lower your arms. You might start to move the chair, the bolster pillow. So my notes are a little bit shorthand, so I'm trying to decipher what I've written here. Bolster thigh, prop elbow, side opener. Yep, okay. So we're back on our bolster, the bolster on our lap. You may or may not, that sounds weird, but stepping on those blocks is your choice if you have them, if you want. So this is a side body opener. We're gonna prop the left elbow, kind of like resting your cheek, like a passive position here. So your arm is on, left arm is elbow and upper arm is on the bolster. You're supporting your head here. And then we're gonna take this top arm, this free right arm, and you might bring that hand to the back of the head. So again, if that hurts you, you can get by with kind of a goalpost arm to keep the elbow in line or lower than the shoulder. That's gonna be helpful. But if you can, it does help to elongate the side body here if you can raise the elbow a little bit higher than the shoulder. So this is strictly to help us open the side body a little bit more. And the idea here is that we're going with momentum and we're not having to exert a whole lot. So make sure your left side of your head is supported. You can really just rest it there in your hand. Couple deep breaths. So we've already done one pretty good side opener. So this one should feel a little bit like you're conditioned for it, like it's coming back to a place you've been. We're going to tie this into a twist. So feel free to lift up out of that side body opener, and you're just going to let the left forearm sit down on your bolster. And you're going to take your right hand over to the back of the chair somewhere. And with the support of that arm, it doesn't just kind of passively sit there. You're actually pushing down that left arm into your bolster. Just start to peekaboo your chest to the right. And again, if your head wants to sit down on your left shoulder for today, for this class, that's fine. So just kind of go with gravity, go with momentum. And every time you exhale, the spine will want to turn more. And sometimes the spine turns more when we're more restful. So that head resting could actually help the spine turn more. Watch the eyes that they're not bugging out of their sockets. Keep them relaxed. Every pose is just a container for your breath. It's a container to study the self. We're opening pathways in the body to our own breath, our prana, which is really our energy. Just a couple more moments here, turning. And sometimes we go pretty deep in twists. So we want to come out like there's a string attached to the top of the head. You're going to come out on an in breath and just turn to face the bolster. You can put both arms there for a moment. And just come to this kind of middle ground. And you might rest your head. You might just be fine bowing the head. We're just going to be here about a half a minute. But just kind of feeling, kind of marinating in those after effects of your twist. We'll go to the other side and we'll do that side body lengthening again. So we're going to prop just the elbow for this first one, the elbow and some of the upper arm. Rest your head like the thinker in that statue. And then if you're able to with the shoulder, you're going to take the left hand to the back of the head and use your left elbow as a kind of the leader. It's going to be lifting and kind of trying to press back to help you lengthen the left side body. Let your right cheek really land in that hand. You don't need to baby it. You can really use your right arm as a pedestal for your face, for your head, for the weight of that head. And just remember this first one, we don't have to twist so much. We're just trying to open the left side body. Open the armpit, that vital energy pocket in the body. I think the thinker actually had his fist under his chin now that I'm thinking about it. Haha. But you know what, we all know what we all know. All right, we're going to take it into the twist. So begin to cross that forearm in front of you so it's all fully on the bolster. Left hand is going to find the chair behind you somewhere. And the arms should just feel like good leverage to help you peak your chest to the left. So it does really help to push down that arm that's resting on your bolster. Pressing down, there's a saying in yoga, root to rise. We can't create space, we have no roots, so push down. You might let your head just gently fall toward your right shoulder. You might close your eyes. Think about the flesh of the right side body starting to come around, the flesh of the left side body starting to move back. No unnecessary tension. So scanning the body is another way we can really stay present in our poses. Just kind of scanning for those grips that we don't need. We all have them, we carry them by default because we're responsible adults. Just let them go. The jaw does not need to be clamping. The temples do not need to be hardened. The eyes can sit back in their sockets. And anywhere else you feel that gripping, that tension, there's good tension that's part of your pose, and then there's the unnecessary tension. A couple more breaths. So we want to come out safely here. We're going to use an in-breath, lengthen through the top of the head, come back to center, and find your resting position sitting forward. You might put your head down, you might just bow the head forward. Just take about a half a minute just to kind of feel the after effects of your twist. Okay. So the next one is a maybe on the pillow bolster prop, because that is a little bit flimsy, but we'll see how it goes. And if it doesn't work so well, just lose it and just have your head freely hanging. So what we're going to do is we're going to open the knees just a little bit. And you're going to prop your vertical bolster on a block if you have one, otherwise just directly on the floor. And this is just another version of a seated forward fold. We don't have the cushion in front of us anymore, so it's a little more spacious that way. It's just nice to know different versions of things because you eventually learn what feels best to you, and then you just do that. So you can take the bolster between your knees just to kind of stabilize it. All we're doing is forward bending. So if the bolster feels too far away, you can use your own hands to build up the height. But we do want to get the head down because it's that quieting that we need for the nervous system. So if the head isn't down, then you can, I'm trying to think of a way. It looks like you guys are getting by, Jill and Sue, with your pillows. So maybe we don't have to troubleshoot it. So again, you want to think about your spine in a single curve. So the placement of the head should kind of be consistent with that. So we don't want to put a crease in the neck. We want to have the chin closer to the chest than away from the chest. So sometimes that means you're resting closer to the hairline. So we're going to take the next 5 exhales as an opportunity to really carve out the out breath to let it fully empty. Forward bends are really good for that. Very nourishing to the nervous system to explore the depth of your exhalation. So of course, we don't want to create any strain or tension. So it's more like tracking the breath out to the last drop rather than forcing it out. So don't harden the abdomen. There might be that just pause at the bottom of the breath before you breathe in. You might even feel a little contraction at the pelvic floor, which is a clue that you've fully emptied the breath. You've touched that lowest diaphragm. And just observe how the in-breaths, they fill back in. Like water rising to sea level, just fills back in. Last exhale. Inhale to come up gently, slowly. Okay, so we're going to transition. Once again, we're winding down. We have just a couple more things before we do our breathing and our sitting quietly, but this is a little new for us, what we're going to do here. It's a version of a seated chair lunge. So what we're going to do is place the bolster down on the floor to the right, basically to prop the right knee. So you might notice because we all have different props at home, we have different chairs, and we have different bodies. So you might notice that you need to creatively build the height up. You can add a blanket, you can add a block, although we need our blocks. If you don't have your blocks, it's okay, we'll get by without them, but you can use anything really that's soft to build the height up so that you have a nice amount of support underneath your right knee. So this is going to be a forward bend, kind of a lunging stance. So if you don't have blocks, you can kind of lean over your left thigh and just prop yourself that way. If you do have blocks, you're going to use them as arm extenders. And when I say blocks, it could be soup cans or books. So just know that I'm using it as a general term. And they're going to go inside the space of the left leg. So if you're propped on your thigh, you're going to be right over the thigh. If you're using blocks, it's right underneath the shoulder line and inside the space of the left knee, okay? So one thing that you can do to make this just a little bit more good strength, good tension, is to step your right knee back if it's willing to go back. The right knee can go a little farther back than being directly in line with the hip. And you're just going to let your head go here. We're putting really good tension on the left hip joint. Good massage. You can think about your femur head just kind of snuggling into that ball and socket joint. Another forward bend, of course, so we're in a brain quieting position. You can think about your brain resting or floating inside your skull passively. And after an exhale, you're going to slowly, you might bring your hands onto your left thigh, but you're going to try to bring yourself up. And we're just going to add a twist to this. So right hand will find left thigh. Left hand will come to the chair. And you want to think about your tailbone moving into the soft tissue of your body. So it's that same posterior pelvic tilt. Just start to gently turn your chest to the left. And you can blink the eyes closed. It'll help you be a little bit more passive here. This is more of an active pose. So anything you can do to dial down, make it a little quieter is going to be helpful. Bringing your attention to your right hip flexor, which for most of us is often kind of in an indented state or a concave state. So think about lengthening the front of your right thigh. Taking the tailbone into the body will help you do that. Ironing it out, smoothing it out. You're going to just take another couple of breaths, not forcing the turn. You're just kind of moving with the twist. Rib cage is floating around, the action of the spine moving. And on an inhale, lift yourself out of the twist. Don't forget that part. It's the safest way to come out of a twist. And you can begin to step your right foot forward. So you might have noticed we have to sit a little bit kind of side saddle, not completely, more like diagonal saddle, to kind of clear the space for the stepping back leg. So I don't even have much of my buttock touching the chair anymore once I get the knee down on that bolster. So remember, it will call upon a deeper experience if you want that, if you take the stepping back leg knee farther back. Don't feel like you have to, it's just a way to keep the attention alert. Remember, forward bends, we kind of cautionary tale of falling asleep or becoming dull, going into what I call screensaver mode. So you're either going to fold forward in a restful way over your right thigh, or you're going to work with the blocks as arm extenders, shoulder width apart underneath the shoulder line and inside the right leg. Let your head simply bow down. So putting good tension on your right hip joint. Juicy massage, lubricating the femur head and the ball and socket joint. Think about ironing out the front left thigh, the hip crease. Tailbone moves into the soft tissue of the body. Brain is there floating around inside the skull. Treat your head like a prop, supporting a decompression of your spine. Last exhale. When you're ready to inhale, you might move your hands under your thigh if you were on the blocks. You're going to start to bring your torso up. This is where we're going to go into the twist. So now the left hand finds the right thigh. It might just be on top, might be off to the side, whatever you can do. And then the right hand is off to the chair back of your chair. And you're just going to slowly start to turn. And if you take your head slightly back, I didn't say this on the first side, but if you take your head slightly back, it helps us access deep into the deepest muscle in the body, which is the psoas. Starts at the rib cage, goes down to the inner thigh, and it's deep, deep, deep. And for a lot of us, it's tight. So if you take your head back and think about that warm movement, 2 inches above and below the navel, and just direct some attention, some breath, some spaciousness. When you're ready, using an in-breath, lengthen out of the twist. Bring yourself upright if you're angled back. Just start to circle back around on your chair seat. We're going to come into our final stretch of poses here, which are going to keep the same setup. So I know I said blocks weren't necessary, but right now, what we're going to try to do is build a little table. And so if you have a way to rest your bolster on something, whether it's blocks or something else you have creatively in your space that you could improvise with, we want to make this little table. And we've used second chairs in previous classes. So if you need to use your second chair, feel free to use that. We're going to come into a few hip openers. So just make sure it's not super precarious. It's not going to be the most stable thing you've ever built, but if you step the blocks a little bit apart, it could be a little bit more stable than 2 blocks together, and then you have this wobbly thing. So just kind of do a test to make sure it's pretty sound structure. First thing we're going to do is be propping our right foot. So you're going to try to get your right foot onto that surface. So a couple things. If your hip is rejecting this, you can go lower and you can go farther away, and those 2 things will, or combination of 2 things, will remedy the hip. That being said, if you need more, you want to bring it higher and closer. So you always have control over how much sensation is going on. This is a right hip opener, and we're going to fold forward, just be aware that we don't want to be feeling it in the knee. If you're feeling it in the knee, you want to back off. So you're going to take your hands onto your bolster. You're going to angle forward with your torso. And because we're folding forward, you want to think about your pelvis now tipping forward. So it's a way to keep your lower back long without rounding it out and hurting it. And you're just going to bow the head. And it's like you're combing through the tension that lives in your right hip with your own breath. You might imagine a little dust devil of your breath coming into the hip space. We do carry tension in our hips, but also there's a lot of those default settings that are past programming. We don't necessarily need that much defensiveness in the hip. So see if you can work through a couple of those layers that live there. They're no longer really relevant. We're going with gravity here, gravity on the back body, helping us sink in a little bit deeper, just a few more breaths. And on an inhale, lengthen up, come all the way up. You can step your right foot down. It's a stabilizing stance, so whatever you need for that. And then we're going to prop the left foot. And our hips are usually different. So we might need a different treatment here. We might need to be somewhat modified or deeper. So just get that first assessment of what's going on when you kind of lean forward. You can sense into that hip space. And then you're going to take your hands down, let your head just kind of passively bow down. You don't have to hold in your neck. You might close your eyes. Soften the abdomen. Find the places you can be soft, which will support your attention, your efforts with this left hip space. Using imagery, maybe the breath swirling around your hip. Meeting some of that resistance, that stickiness in the hip. When we meet sensations, various sensations in the body, it can be fun. We use our imagination so much in yoga. It can be fun to give that sensation a texture. I just said sticky, but maybe it's more like sharp. Maybe it's more soft. So finding a texture you can sense in your hip. So that's 3 breaths here. It's moving into your last phase. On an in-breath, you're going to slowly rise up. You can keep your left foot there, move it a little bit aside, because we're going to put both feet up now. This is bound angle pose. So you might prefer pushing those blocks farther or pushing the setup farther. You'll know if you need to adjust because your body will complain. We don't get very far if the body is in a complaining state. So we need to start with lots of support, and then you can wean off the support as you develop the mobility. So you might just keep this upright today and just work with feeling the weight of the knees descending, keeping your posture nice and tall. We don't want to think about the lower back shortening. So think about your abdomen staying soft and the underside of an umbrella idea, that every time you breathe in, rather than inflating, kind of take the soft abdomen toward the lower back. If you want a little bit more here, you can come forward and lean into it, but you don't need it. You don't necessarily need it, and only you know, you're in your body. And here the groins are getting a chance to open and elongate. The hips, of course, are still in a nice external rotation. We're bringing attention to the breath. Every time you breathe in and the belly becomes a little bit more concave softly, just feel the breath, how it's forced to rise and spread. We just push the belly forward. We lose all that opportunity to flex, stretch the lungs, move the side ribs, lift the sternum. %60 of your lung tissue is in the back. So for the last couple of breaths, think about the back lungs. See if you can sense the breath actually expanding the back lungs. Before we come into our pranayama practice, we're going to step down. You have the same setup, and now it's a lower point of contact. We're going to see if we can get the head there. If you need to build it up, of course you can. You can sit way back on your chair, separate the knees. You might add your arms in as additional height. You might use your prayer hands again to get a nice connection that way. You could do the pedestal fist, whatever works for you. And you're going to let your head come down. We're back to kind of where we started in this forward fold, single spinal curvature, brain quieting pose. Takes us back to our in utero sensory experience before we had words. Very quiet place. You can only sense the outer world. Last several breaths. Track those exhales, go deeper, take them to their very final beat. You're going to start to gently come up. You might like to use your bolster on your lap. It kind of depends on how it fits you. We're going to come into just some breathing and quiet sitting after the breathing. You might reduce down to your blanket on your lap. The idea with the prop on your lap is that you can rest your forearms and the elbows. If the wrists are slightly higher than the elbows, then your shoulders drop a little bit. So it's a kind of a good surrendered shoulder position. So it helps us kind of stay in a nice position with the effort dial turned down. So use the back of the chair. Make sure you're comfortably seated, that you're not rounded in the low back. So you want to be on your sitting bones, not on the tailbone. You can have palms up, which is a little more receptive. You can have palms turned down, which is a bit more quieting. So just kind of feel out what you want to be with the hands. And then close the eyes. And the first stage of any breathing practice is just to really drop in and notice. And of course, when you start to pay attention to something, it automatically changes. So you might use the idea that you're watching somebody else breathing, which can give you a little more distance from the breath, which can keep the breath a little less altered by your attention. And begin to notice if there's a difference between the length of your in-breath and the length of your out-breath. So before we practice something, I want to remind you that whenever we practice breath work, the idea is that it's moving us toward meditation. So it's the idea that we're soothing the brain. So if you find that the practices are making you irritable, or they're making your breath feel foreign, or anything negative, then just come back to breath observation. Because the goal of pranayama is to take us deeper into ourselves, into that inner quiet, peaceful state. So what we're going to do is attempt to practice something called samavriti, same frequency breathing. So if you notice the discrepancy between in-breath and out-breath, you're just going to simply try to make them match. It could be that you make one side of the breath longer. It could be that you reduce one side of the breath. So that's completely up to you and how it works in your body. But we're going to try to create even inhale, even exhale. So in this way, we're bringing more balance to the breathing. We're going to practice a few more ways to do this. So I also now want to bring your attention to what you feel when the breath starts. So the top of the in-breath and the end of the in-breath. The start of the out-breath and the finish of the out-breath. Just notice if there's kind of a matching sensation. And if you notice there's a difference, see what you can do about making it very similar. So the in-breath starting feels much like the in-breath finishing. The out-breath begins and finishes in a very similar way. So when we practice samavriti, we're kind of connecting with the breath becoming this very full, smoothly flowing river. Another way we can work with evenness is to think about your lungs. And you might not be able to really sense your lungs, but imagine your lungs. And as you breathe in, are they filling evenly, left and right? Are you touching those back lungs? Is the breath expanding the side ribs and lifting the sternum? Just another minute of this practice. So whatever you found useful to help you find more evenness to your breathing, you're going to go with that. Whatever you didn't find useful, you're going to leave it behind. finding your way back to just the simple act of breath observation. So prana is energy, yama is restraint. So when we practice breath work, we put restraints on the breath. Now there are no restraints. Your breath is free flowing. Maybe there's some dry patches, maybe there's some waterfalls. You're back to your free flowing river of breath. Maybe it's continuing to be that big, full, even river. But whatever it is, you're just noticing and allowing. Watching that river flow. The breath really governs the brain. So if we can learn to get as far as controlling the breath, we have a lot of influence over the brain. So let's take a nice deep breath in and just let it go. You might start to make some fists and extend your fingers. You might squeeze your toes and wiggle the toes. You can open your eyes. If you're bolstered down, if you're working with a bolster. We'll bring our hands together in front of our hearts, just acknowledging this little group we've had for a while now. And I really appreciate all of you coming and participating and all your sweet notes and feedback. And it's been lovely. And I do hope to see you again in the future. So stay in touch and namaste. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you soon.